Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special meeting of the Greenwich Board of Selectmen. Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to this public meeting of the Board of Selectmen. It is not a public hearing. The purpose of today's meeting is to review item number 2, which is a request for consideration of municipal improvement status for New Lebanon School, specifically option number 1, which was recently passed by the Board of Education last Thursday evening. In addition to that presentation, the Board of Selectmen has several questions pertaining to the request for municipal improvement that were outlined in a letter that was dated December 1st, delivered December 2nd to the Board of Ed. There were 4 points, as well as further clarifying outline of issues discussed yesterday with the chair of the building committee and the chair of the Board of Ed. So to begin, we welcome you and have you review with us your recommended option that the board has acted favorably upon.
Thank you, Mr. First Selectman. My name is Richard Sipek. We've seen each other. We haven't formally met, so I'm glad to say hello finally face-to-face with you and members of the board. We have brought with us quite a bit of material. You've seen this material, and I don't want to go through everything in great detail, but I do want to spend a little bit of time explaining to you the points of option number 1, and then touch upon how we got to number 1. I would like to, if you have the time, allow us to discuss some of the other options that we presented. I was a little bit concerned when we've made presentations in the past before the public that the impression I believe some people might have is that we didn't take option D revised seriously, and we did, and I would like to spend a little bit of time talking about that as well. Since Thursday's meeting with the board, we have continued to think about the issues that were raised, some of the questions that were raised, and as I've represented in the past, this is a schematic design. It's a work in progress. I'm here to listen to your comments. And if it's possible, if it's necessary, we can incorporate some of the suggestions that you make. So I would like this to be a dialogue between us. With me this afternoon are my partner Tai-Soo Kim, sitting here, and Jesse Saylor, who you may have met before. Sitting in front of you is a three-dimensional model, and we see the massing of the existing New Lebanon School up on the plateau. That's carved out of styrofoam. It's in pink color. And next to it is built out of basswood is option number 1. What I'm going to do is ask Tai-Soo to talk a little bit about option number 1, and then we can go back and talk about some of the options and why, what our thought process was for all of them.
Good afternoon. My name is Tai-Soo Kim of Tai-Soo Kim Partners. I will explain just briefly how this design started, and I think that helped a great deal. Why is this building this shape and this idea? Before, is it okay? Okay. Well, before interview, I came to the site, and we were told this entire area is for a future school candidate, and we were told this existing building going to be removed. So I walked the site and really wooded area and so on, and I thought it is possible we can build this new school without removing existing building during construction. I thought that's a very good benefit for the town because, number one, you're going to save quite a bit of money, and number two, you don't have to relocate children and so on. And so I thought about that. And the next one is, then where do you build it? And I saw this piece of land right here. It's sort of a deep area. And one idea I thought about is, what about building up the land about 12 to 15 feet from the lowest point and create a platform, and that will be the lower level of 2 stories high building. And the way to approach the building is from upper part, meaning from existing school site. So you can build this one and complete it, and then students be able to use this school from this side. It's a north side, and after removing this building, existing building, and then develop a site all along here. And I thought site plan is very important to have generous bus drop-off, parking, and children's play area all in one place. And this way we have enough land here, incorporate all those things on this site. And construction is another issue, is how can we build a very economical and also easy way to construct. So this shape came about strictly from existing contours. If you draw elevation 45, that's about 12 feet higher than lowest point, that's where this foundation is. That's the shape came from, that contour. So it's construction-wise, it's very easy to build foundation on that 45 and then 2 stories high building. So actually this proposed building is the same roof height with your existing building. So visually you're going to see a similar experience to you coming to the site, the profile of the building. So that's sort of basically the genesis of this idea. And the shape of the building is a simple form, and it is very efficient. And I think if you look at the floor plan inside, it really has this sense of community building organization. Has a interior in the middle, cafeteria 2 stories high, and also a media center in the right middle, and administration is right here looking out all these parkings. So I feel quite good about these things. I built at least 20 public school in Connecticut, and I think this school is very unique. Take advantage of the land, this very challenging land, and come up with a very unique design. And I think it will create a memorable school for the children. And so I like to listen your concern, and there are a lot of room to revise and improve. For example, already we have moved this building almost about 30 feet further to this property line. So meaning this building will move about here. So that means away from wetland more, and also away from the highway. And a few other things I heard about, concern about bridge. We certainly be able to do something else other than bridge. So I'm here to listen to your comments. Shall we stay just this or continue other design?
I want to
Go ahead.
take a minute and refer the members of the board to page 4 in the handout that we gave you. Page 4 is a site plan that illustrates the footprint of the building, And that footprint is now, in this diagram, moved further north, as Taisu suggested. So the footprint of the building is right on the property line. It's right on the right-of-way line that goes between the school site and the playfield. You can see also the bus loop and the pickup and drop-off area by cars. Now, let's flip to page 15. Page 15 illustrates two plans, one of which is the option 1, which is the image below, and then it superimposed on it is option D, revised as it was presented to us. Page 15. In the lower right corner, I numbered the pages. We were asked by the committee to prepare this, and we did share this with them before so that they could see how the two sites compare. You can see that the white area of option 1 is a little further south, and then the parking area also is a little further south than the footprint that's shown in option D. Now, probably what we should do is go to option 2. Because option 2, when we looked at D, it didn't quite work from our standpoint, from an architectural standpoint. We did develop option 2 to...
Okay, just clarification though, can you explain why, in your opinion, it didn't work?
Why don't we jump to D? Yeah.
We're having a difficulty because there are no diagrams for the public, which is option 2.
These all over the place here.
Could they give them a better name than 1 and 2? So we at least know what they're talking about.
Okay. Could you hold this up, Jesse? Yeah. This is option number 1, which is the shape, the irregular shape of the perimeter walls to follow the contours of down in the hole, if you will. Yes, that's option number 1. Option D, which Jesse is putting on the site right now, is basically an L-shaped building, if you will. And this was our attempt to try to improve the parking circulation up on the plateau. If you look at the footprint of option D revised, it has a building block and it has a U-shaped footprint adjacent to it. That's what the diagram says. Page 28. But that U-shaped configuration takes up a lot of room up on the plateau. So what we recommended is take that U-shape and stretch it out in linear form. What that does is allow more acreage up at the top of the hill that can be developed for parking and traffic circulation. That's shown on page 29.
One of the main differences is this is 3 stories high. This portion is 3 stories high, and this portion is 2 stories high. And because of size of the building, configuration, and I believe option D envision 3 stories high, and that's what it is. And from our experience designing elementary school, 3 stories high elementary school not recommended from my point of view. It's just too many up and down, and between classrooms and gymnasium or cafeteria relationship is not going to be very satisfactory.
I think we have several questions before we go further.
Yeah.
So you just showed us option 1, and in your comments, you stated that you were taking advantage of, quote, the challenging land, unquote. And I think one of the overarching reasons why this board has been reluctant and frankly opposed to using that, quote, unquote, challenging land is because it, in our mind, contains unknowns. certainly, history is our greatest teacher. This community has just gone through a very extensive series of remediation issues on land within town, also not just incorporating contaminants, but drainage. And so my question is, you're taking advantage of the challenging land. Would you define the existing site where the school is situated, where you have this, what looks like a beautiful building to me, or the model of a building, would you describe that as challenging? Aside from what your philosophical view is
Okay.
on what makes a better school from a academic point of view, which to me is subjective. Can you touch on that?
Well, from the site point of view, all these three schemes, we could not build the entire new school on the high plateau area. As you can see it, portion of the building is already on this difficult issue involved. As you mentioned about this ravine and drainage and so on. So if we build the entire option entirely on higher ground, that's much more of a clear answer to your concern about challenging here. But all other options, we end up occupying some portion of it in this. So we are dealing with all same that difficult issues. So.
Understood. I just want to,
And then
understood.
the other thing is, this steep hill from high and low plateau is very steep rock. It's like a 27 feet drop. And spanning building between these two will be very, in my mind, challenging and a costly effort to build on that steep hill. That's why I think option one is very simple in my mind. It's very easy construction-wise because you can keep the existing building and then build a school within that, and so that's my answer. It's just
Again,
involved.
I appreciate it. We approved an option, though, that incorporated use of the front part
Right.
of that land, recognizing it achieved one of the core objectives of the schools in the ed specifications, which was to bring the gym in closer proximity to the play field, which it appears this option does. So again, I want to be clear that we're not exclusively saying it had to be on the top where the existing school is,
Right.
but desirable to be there with use of that front portion. And it's why we came up with revised Scheme D, because it appeared to have achieved all objectives, both for the schools and for the town body that is charged with referring the use of the land forward to the planners.
Can I,
Yes.
am I hearing you correctly that D, revised, as presented because of the education specification and the size of the building, that's the challenge, correct?
Well,
What I'm saying is, if the building was smaller,
Okay.
would this be site D, would that be an easier piece of land to build on?
Well, the specifications state that 58,000 square feet of school building. And to meet that specification and also closely matching the original Scheme D, this is the footprint of the building. To end up, we have to have a 2 stories high here and 3 stories high here to accommodate that square footage required in specification.
Correct, but if it was, and I'm not saying this is, I'm not implying at all that the specification should be changed, but if it were, in fact, a smaller building, I'm assuming, am I correct to say that this would be an easier piece of land to build on?
Yes, it stands to reason, yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Shall we look at option 2? Because option 2 made an effort to build a new building that tries to mimic option D, but has more latitude, if you will. This one tries to adhere very closely to the D that was presented to us. We weren't sure how how restricted we were. So rather than coming back with two options, this one and option one, we looked at option two, thinking if there's a little bit more latitude, what would that look like? And so, can I ask Jesse to put that model on? Okay, before we put this away, for everyone's benefit, this is option D. Option D, or sometimes called D revised.
So as Richard was saying, with option 2, we had your de-revised footprint, and we understood there was an intent there, but we weren't sure that adhering to that footprint would achieve the intent, particularly with the 3 stories and the interior layout. So we looked at using the same space on the site and to see if we could achieve the EdSpec areas while having a building that's 1 and 2 stories high, and sort of in the same location, both at the upper plateau and at the lower site. So, and then on top of that, we made an initial attempt before we had spoken to you and received commentary. And then we made a revised attempt after understanding better your intent behind the diagram, because all we really had to go off of originally to understand the intent was a diagram, which it's hard to tell what was important there. So the first version of option 2 is on the model now, and that has the single story portion up on the upper plateau, which is gymnasium, pre-K kindergarten, and administration. It had this large courtyard separating to a back portion of the building with the cafeteria, classrooms, science and art, and that was 2 stories for all the academic areas. And after receiving your initial round of commentary, we understood the interest in keeping the building to the north and to the west as much as possible, and the impact on the or the amount of area the building disturbed in the woods to the east of the building. So we came up with option 2 revised, which I'm now switching to. It's page 22. Just something like that. Option 2 revised simply moves classrooms from the south end of the lower wing to the north end, and it comes up right to the property line. You can see on page 23, we've overlaid it with the Scheme D revised footprint that you gave us, and it substantially fits within the construction area of the Scheme D footprint you gave. The exception would be the parking and the play area to the south on the upper plateau. However, those areas are underneath the existing building, so to remove the existing building would require you to address them in some way anyways in the original Scheme D revised plan. So your other comment was, would the gym be at the lower level with access to the field? We have considered that in this option, though you won't see it on page 24 and 25 is currently laid out that way. We continue to show the gym on the upper plateau. Here, we do think there is a possibility of increasing this footprint slightly at the lower level and placing the gym at the lower level to achieve that. The con, perhaps, is that the interior circulation works quite well for after-hours activities to access the gym via the parking and entry at the upper level. And so in any scheme, when you move it to the lower level, you you have to, that's a trade-off. It requires opening more of the building to use the gym.
Yeah, in for my two colleagues as well, in comparison to D aside, option 1 versus option 2, the pros and cons when you're comparing the two. Can I have your professional opinion on that?
Well, I think option 1 has a more cohesive interior. It's really one building, and the interior spaces are more consistently open. Option 2, the interior works pretty well. I think relative to our ability to work with the de-revised footprint, it's a great improvement in terms of the openness of the spaces to each other, the ability of the school program to function. Maybe you want to add to that. Yes.
Well, I know there is a sort of concern of a negative feeling about this is a deep ravine, if I may say that. As you can see, all 3 schools, including D, we do have some portion of the building in that D. So we are dealing, regardless which scheme you go, you are dealing with these things. And as you can see it, even this one, the higher ground and the lower ground, it's construction-wise, it's a lot more complex dealing with and connecting this steep rock area. That's why I think strong point of option 1 is simplicity of idea, simplicity of construction, and as Jesse said, inside is a lot more cohesive and a sense of community building as a school, and I think that's the difference. And as you can see, option 2 is we're not very fond of designing 3 stories high elementary school. So this is 2 stories high elementary school. That's why the footprint is a lot bigger than scheme D.
Okay, just one follow-up. Now back to, we're going from 1, 2, and then D. Then back to D. You mentioned at the Board of Education meeting, and I'm paraphrasing, that with a little more latitude, a little more movement, if you will, that D, revised, could be brought up to that wow effect. I'm using my words. Can you elaborate what you meant by that in terms of using more of the footprint, et cetera, to bring up what you called?
I've been asked before, what do I mean by wow? Wow is an expression of surprise. So if people...
That was your words. Yeah, that was... Yeah,
those are my words,
Okay,
right. I
right.
did use the word wow, and then I was asked, well, what do you mean by that? And that's what it means. It means that people who come to the building are surprised. They're seeing something that they didn't expect. It's not a conventional corridor arrangement with classrooms on both sides of the corridor. It's a different kind of configuration. So initially, people are surprised, and then they're pleased by what they see. We would have to stray from the form that D revised gave us, because if you look at the plans that were developed for D, those are single or double loaded corridors. It's basically a wing here, a wing there, a connector to a block, and I think there's less of a wow in that. I think when 2, which tries to break out of the D perimeter, does get closer to that wow effect.
But stick with D, though. You mentioned, though, so if because these were your words, with more latitude, and I didn't get a chance to ask you what you meant by that, but if given some more latitude with D, not 2 or 1, could it be brought out to that effect? I didn't know what you meant by that at the meeting last week.
It meant getting beyond that perimeter and arranging the classrooms not in double-loaded corridors, but in some different kinds of arrangements. Perhaps they're clusters of classrooms. Perhaps there's a common workspace between classrooms. Corridors are not just corridors, they're actually educational spaces. That's what I mean. So in order to achieve that, the perimeter has to I need some wiggle room in the perimeter to do that.
Which in a sense you're doing with 2 anyway, correct?
Correct.
So I mean, we're calling it D, so I mean, so in a sense, is that what you did with 2 anyway?
Yes. We chose to name it 2 because we really felt that we should leave D footprint alone. So let's D. Let's not mess with that nomenclature. And then this one is different. It's different from what I thought the instructions were in the RFP. That's why we called it number 2. I am hopeful that, I know everyone I've spoken with does want this to be a very successful project, that the members of the community have been waiting quite some time for this school to be built. I heard that loud and clear at the Board of Ed meeting. If you were there, you certainly heard it. So I am hopeful that we can come up with a solution that you can be supportive of. I was concerned at the Board of Ed meeting that you expressed the sentiment that you could not support option 1, which really could bring the project to a standstill. So I'm hopeful that you can give us direction to go forward.
Certainly. Well, many other things can bring the project to a standstill at points into the future, such as one of the questions I'd like to know about the land, since you, again, clearly enumerated that it's a difficult or challenging land. And I think that's what has this whole governance hung up on, is that we're dealing with what we consider to be unknowns. So perhaps if things became known, we would have less apprehension. Has all the geological testing been done in there? I believe under your option 1, you're bringing soil in. Talk to us in terms of what environmental assessment you've done with this land that would assure us that the moment we put a shovel in the ground, that we're not going to be hit with
Can I talk
some
about
type
that?
of impediment, whatever it may be.
Sure. And I can understand why you have that concern, given your recent project that you did, and then you encounter soil conditions that were surprising and then were very costly to mitigate. That was a filled site, from my understanding. This is not a filled site, except for the portion that I-95 was created. That portion was filled so that the roadway could be elevated. Historically, that site was low. It's as low as those stone walls are that were the entry points into the estate that existed there previously. That's the bottom of that ravine. That's the original topography. So it's not a filled site. It's not a site that has been a dump area, for example. You'll find that kind of situation in an urban setting. That's not what we see here. We looked at historical maps, and the topography there has been similar for all of this time, except for where 95 was put. And we're not excavating any of the filled area that 95 is placed. We did have some geological work done. We have had tests done in several locations on the site near the school, as well as in the deep part of the ravine. And there's nothing in the ravine that we are alarmed at. We do need to do a whole lot more testing, but so far we've uncovered nothing that is alarming. The only thing that is of concern that we discovered is where the old oil tanks were up by the school. And that's a pretty straightforward remediation process of excavating the old tanks out, making sure that all the fill is removed and clean fill is brought in. So there's been nothing on the site that would suggest we would have that problem that you had in your earlier project, recent project.
Well, I'd like to add that because of accurate topography is so crucial to make this one work. So we asked a surveyor, went back, and they really did a 1-foot survey, very accurate survey. And so we have a very accurate survey, and I'm confident. I mean, I built more than 100 buildings during my career, and I think I'm very confident that option 1, based on the idea really based on topography, rock situation, and the existing building, and that really, I think in my mind, most smooth construction process. I'm very confident there wouldn't be any major issue during construction with that. I am more concerned the building of connecting, some portion is down here, some portion is up here.
And again, just it may be redundant, but I believe my colleague asked, so 2 is essentially revised Scheme D? Did I hear that or no?
Yes,
So 2 is, so what we're looking at
is D re-revised.
for the most part, because we talked about it in general terms of a campus, defined as all the accompanying facility you need to have the school operate. So emergency access, parking, the refuse area for pickup and all of that. So that model in front of us conforms to generally what you believe we approved in that revised schematic dated June 23rd from Gisolfi.
Yes, and the proof of that is diagram 23, which shows the D scheme overlaid on top of this re-revised diagram. You can see that if you were to draw a dotted line around the perimeter of that improvement, they would be virtually the same.
Can I ask a hypothetical?
Sure.
Back to D now, not revised or revised again, back to D.
Right.
If you presented a drawing or a schematic that the client didn't like, but they didn't have the option of going into more land because there's not more land, what then? So if this board comes back and says, we want to see another D, do you think that will be any different than what you're having, that you've shown us? Or are you telling us that is it?
Well, if you're asking me if this can be developed?
No, I'm asking D.
D?
Yes, what this board voted on. Using part of the ravine or woodland area, but if we just didn't like, I mean, if your concern is 3 stories, if your concern is, and there was no other land to go, what would you tell the client then?
We would tell the client,
That could have, I'm asking, I don't know.
well, you need to give us some more latitude. In order
But my
to-
question is, if there is no more latitude, though, and I'm asking, so that's it, that's, so if we direct you, or through the building committee or whatever, to say, we want to see another D, a different schematic, a different drawing, whatever, are you saying then that cannot be done?
Of course it can be done, but why constrain us with this hypothetical?
That's really up. But that was the question, though.
Yeah.
So it could be done.
Hypothetically, sure. If you said this is absolutely the only land that's available, you must be within here, sure, we could do it within there.
It would look completely different. Would it look a lot different than what you presented to us now?
In terms of massing, no. You would have an arrangement in a linear form here with classrooms on both sides of a corridor, and you'd have a 3-story block here, and there's a connection between the two. I mean, we could shift this a little bit, this could be shifted a little bit, but essentially, that's the form.
Well, I'd like to make a comment why we did not do U-shape. If you look at the Scheme D, original Scheme D, the site plan is not good because we don't know where the bus drop-off is, and there are 3 different places, parkings. There is no major entrance to the school, so it's really crucial to elementary school. The bus, generous bus, parkings and play area, all easily visible for security reason. And if you look at the D, because of the D scheme occupied with large portion of upper part, you just didn't have enough land to put a good, proper site layout. I mean, that drawing just testified that. So end up, some parking is here, some parking is here, some parking here. I mean, that's not good. That is not good. I certainly not gonna show you saying this is school we going to build for Greenwich and proud of it? I don't think so. I don't think so. I mean, why would you tell to architect something basic framework is not good and tell him do it that way? I mean, that doesn't seem a lot of sense to me.
No, just
Well, you have to use your microphone.
one observation. The governor of the state was down here last Wednesday, and he spoke to the RMA, and he spoke a lot about the issues that are in the state. And one of the issues he spoke about was the two major roads that go through Greenwich. One he called a museum and another parking lot. And he talked about billions of dollars being spent on increasing the width of 95. So in effect, we're bringing the school closer to 95 if they go through with this in the next 20 years.
Okay. So, thank you. In terms of the areas of concern, we talked about one, having you review the process that you develop, option one, which you've done, to address the 4 concerns that the Board of Selectmen raised in the letter last week to the Board of Ed regarding deviations from Scheme D in option one, and that was touched on uses significant more portions of the ravine. 2 appears to place the school building closer to 95. Removes the William Street ball field from active use for a longer period of time. Anticipates school construction while students are in the existing building was 4. And I believe there's a question pertaining to that Mr. Marzullo would like to ask.
And this is really directed to the school board, actually. So if Bill wants to speak at this, or Ms. Erickson, I remain, since day one, reluctant to, approve or vote for a plan that houses kids in session when school construction is going on. Now, this does run in an area where, in terms of the MI process, I will say that, whether or not this is the board's, there's a boundary, whether or not we're crossing it when we start to, voice our opinion about, reluctance when it comes to educationally. It's my opinion. I'm not a member of the school board. I'm a selectman. I do say there is going to be a major distraction for kids to be housed where they are when major construction's going on. And I can tell you, though, housing kids, off-site in $2 million, $2 million plus modules has to be better, in my opinion, where they are now. That's my opinion. But I go back to, I would like an opinion where the entire school board is in terms of housing kids where they are during major construction. I've heard from individual people. I've talked to Ms. Erickson many times. I asked if she would comment during the board, and I still do not have an answer in terms of where the entire board stands on this. I know there's money placed in the capital budget, but that was because, correct me if I'm wrong, that was placed in there because D would require, you have D that's going to require the kids to move. You have Site 1 that gives them the option to stay, period. Then you have Site 2 that gives either or. Am I correct?
Good question.
Let me start from the administration standpoint and then from the board, because clearly the administration makes recommendations to the Board of Education, and then they make the decision. The building committee has been working on this very, very actively, as you know and others know. My understanding is need to make a decision about siting that can be, let me underscore that, can be separated from where the location of children are. When option D, option whatever, before that was on the plate, we grappled as administration with what do we do with the children not staying in New Lebanon. We looked at the modular option, which would be modulars adjacent to Western Middle School, high-quality modulars, not like the previous modulars in Greenwich. Let me repeat that, high-quality modulars that are good, solid, wonderful spaces for children for the time they're there. We grappled with that. We costed it out. And coincidentally, Taisoo Kim came in with the same cost estimate roughly as we had costed out, so a little north of $2 million. We also then looked at a dispersion option. If you were to take the school, and we'd have to divide them across 3 schools, K through 1 at North Street, 2nd and 3rd grade at Parkway, and 4th and 5th within the Western Middle School building. The cost differential there without any state reimbursement, the cost for dispersion is roughly just south of $1 million due to transportation issues and additional staffing issues. I'm just talking dollars. It's roughly $2 million for the modulars. We have some potential still. We don't know exactly for state reimbursement on the modular side. If we get state reimbursement, you can see that delta gets closer. The quality of programming differential from the administration standpoint, let me use a small word, is gigantic. If we disperse, International Baccalaureate program is likely undermined. That is the organizing principle for New Lebanon per our agreement with the state under the racial balance
They'll
statute.
disperse into modules or disperse across?
No, modulars we can hold on to the IB program because they're all in one location. If we disperse to 3 schools, we put at great risk the International Baccalaureate program. We were up for reauthorization during the dispersion. If we disperse, it's highly unlikely we can hold on to that program, which let me be very clear, undercuts our relationship with the State Board of Education as to our racial balance plan.
Sure.
That racial balance plan voted on by the State Board is predicated on a magnet program of strength at New Lebanon. That is the IB program. Second, by the nature of the student population at New Lebanon School, being in a cohesive single place, as you yourself spoke to in the modulars, allows us to maximize the Title I programs. We can do Title I at the other schools, but it's undercut, particularly for our English second language learners. Having them in a single location is much better for that programming. Third, our before and after school programming, which is very essential for the New Lebanon population, is made much more difficult if they're spread across 3 schools. Lastly, if they're spread across 3 schools, we leave ourselves district-wide at the elementary level 4 empty rooms. So any slight adjustment in enrollment means midpoint we may have to shift New Lebanon children from one school to another school. Or as we did in our analysis, you take one preschool classroom out of North Street and we have to move them to a different school. So the potential for disruption is very, very high. But the better approach is make a decision on this site, and if the first selectmen are worried about construction issues, we as administration are prepared to say, have them in modulars at Western Middle School. We've communicated closely with the principal, Barbara Riccio. We know the families at New Lebanon would prefer to stay in the existing building, but their much preferred second choice is modulars and not to be spread across the town.
Board come out, though.
I think the board, I want to have the board speak for itself. Last point, historically, and we've studied the history, Greenwich has always made the good decision to keep school communities together during construction. We've only gone to dispersion when we've had a problem. So at Ham Ave and Glenville, we only dispersed when we had a problem. We went in with an initial modular plan. So that's why if you feel that don't want to have children near a construction site, that's me, you can make this decision separately. As an administration, that's up for Laura and others to speak where the board may be, it would be modulars adjacent to Western Middle School, but not dispersion.
Because of process, and we're all debating process here, because it's as Peter says, we have a system of government here that it is process. I recognize of what you're saying. I mean, there is an inherent risk, I guess, because ultimately it's going to be the finance board that is going to either fund modules or not when it comes down to that, decision at the very. We can get to a point. Look, this board could weigh in and say, for safety reasons, for academic reasons, we want modules based on whatever, and as one, even though I cannot condition an MI. But when it comes down to it, at the very end, if they're going to debate $2 million versus one, in the end, it's going to be the finance board that's going to end up telling you, in terms of advising, in terms of because of the money, where these kids might go. Here's my point. My point is I would like to hear from the Board of Education in terms of what their feeling is versus two choices, whether or not if this board didn't have a concern about educational needs or because of having, once again, a major construction site in close proximity to kids, what your plan was.
Last thing I'll say, we feel comfortable, as you've heard the architects, who are quite expert at building buildings. I mean, we've looked at what they've done in Darien and other places very closely, just from the educational side, separate from the building committee.
Yep.
I trust their judgment. We could run a very effective school in proximity to the construction. I'm also, though, saying, so let me say that, we have talked about that at length within the administration, talked about it at length with Barbara Riccio. The families have grappled with that in New Lebanon. We're confident we could do that. However, if a decision's made that that can happen, we're saying, then please make a decision for the best long-term building, and then we will find a way, be it, we hope, through modulars, and every year we grapple with that balancing act of a finance body making decisions relative to what the administration feels, what the board feels. We'd prepare for that balancing act. But
Good afternoon. Thank you for having this meeting. Thank you for organizing this on such short notice and being very responsive to our board vote last week. The board's primary interest is the safety and security of children. Secondarily, but not any less important, is the best educational interest of our children. I think the board is very open to moving the children off-site if it's any issue of safety or security. In some of the options we were discussing in the spring, that was clearly what needed to be done. The board took a vote 8-0 to request MI referral for modulars at Western. This is a slightly different scenario where the kids could potentially stay on the school on the plateau if the school is being built down below. Ultimately, I think it's up to the professionals. The building committee is looking right now at proposals from construction management firms who are expert in designing site logistics plans, safety logistic plans. It's not just the school that needs to be thought about, it's also the patrons of the Byram Schubert Library. So I think without taking a vote, and cannot commit my board to something that hasn't been voted upon, we are keeping the money for the modulars in the capital plan, which will be voted on next week. We certainly, in any cases of safety or security, listen to the experts. If the experts tell us it cannot be done, then of course we're going to move the kids. If the experts say it could be done but it's not ideal, I think we're going to try and move the kids. When it comes to going before the BET budget committee and full BET for asking for money, we're used to that. We've done that, and we're willing to do that if we think it's in the best interest of the kids. So what I would say is that the board is very open to the idea, again, bearing in mind that the safety and security of students is our utmost priority.
Yeah, I'm going to be reluctant to vote. I need more than that. I'm going to be honest, to vote for keeping the kids on. Now, I am well aware of process. I do safe. This is what I do for a living. No safety expert's going to get up and say, and believe me, I'm not an alarmist. I'm a realist in terms of the possibility of something happening to a child. Of course, there's inherent risk if your child's walking across. But once again, so we're clear, and I think I've made myself clear to you and to the board members. I am going to be reluctant to vote on MI if I need something more than just that. What you're saying in terms of keeping kids in. Once again, I am aware of the process. I am aware that there's going to be budget, the budget committee, the BET is going to weigh in, but I just want to be clear of that.
I mean, be it option D, we would have to relocate the children.
Correct.
I mean,
Yeah.
so.
Well, that's why it's been, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, that's the reason why the money's in there in the first
Yeah,
place.
so since early October, and it's all public documents, we've done the analysis for the administration. So with option D solely on the plan, we'd have to relocate the children. So we'd then be in that discussion, as you're worried about, with the finance board. We'd have to say, is it dispersion at roughly $1 million or $2 million for the modulars? Was that number with the potential to come well south? So the delta would be very small. The other factor going on, which I was reminded by people here as I consulted when I sat down, is we are out of space in New Lebanon. We are leasing bank, which has been a wonderful partner for us, but we're leasing bank space. You know, I had very intense conversations earlier this fall with the New Lebanon families because we're not sure we'll have room in this coming year. They've committed to, with us, families and the administration, having space at the existing New Lebanon. But we're out of room there now anyway. So if the Board of Selectmen say, you know, let's not have children on site, that's where you decide. And if that gives you freedom to make the kind of decision you're hearing recommended by the building committee, the architects, know that even with Site D, we had to relocate children and then get into the conversation with the finance board about how do we pay for it. So from the administration standpoint, we're prepared to provide the data, the analysis, the information for modulars, dispersion, which we're highly recommending against, or bring you more information on the construction. But I hope you see the distinction I'm trying to draw.
I do, but I do.
Yeah, because if we stayed with D, we're in the finance conversation you're worried about.
Sure. And what I'm saying is I want the finance conversation to take place whether it's D, 1, 2, 3, M, or S. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm confident that the town leaders will say, we see the analysis and we will support this. Because if you take $2 million divided over a 50-year building investment, that's not a lot of investment for a 50-year gain. I mean, I think we can bring that kind of analysis to bear.
And again, I would just add, I'm willing to bring that item forward to our board where I, without having had a vote, but I think there is a strong sense that obviously security and safety is in our foremost interest. We'll bring that forward to the BET.
Great. Thank you very much. Coming back to the sites, I just want to for reiteration and for public clarity, so option 2 is synonymous to revised Scheme D, correct? Correct. So essentially now we've narrowed it down to the approved, again, for public consumption. It's option 1, which the building committee and the Board of Ed have approved, and then 2, which is equal to D. Correct. So I just want to make sure everybody on our board is aware of that as we look to try to facilitate this as it relates to specifically the site selection.
And that's a good point, because
Is that agree? Well, no, do you agree? I mean, so you agree that, so
No,
we
I do, yeah.
I just want you to leave here and the people listening that we get that, so that, because it is very confusing if you're a layperson, you're hearing all of us talk about letters and numbers, so, and again, for my benefit, could you put it looks purple to me, 2, back in place, just so I could.
This portion is 1 story high, sitting on where existing building is. And this 2 stories high is sitting entirely in that ravine
Right.
area. So it is bridging between high ground and the low ground.
So in that, again, looking at the renderings and then the model's easier for me to process. There's no bridges externally, as in there are with 1.
Internally, it's sort of bridging this, building is bridging this 2 different elevations.
Sure, go ahead.
I want to point out that if you compare this with
I have my own microphone. If we were to compare this with the original option D, you'll see that there's a bar configuration over here. And then in D, the original D, there's a block here. But D also has a playground here at the low portion of the site. Instead of a 3-story block here, we made it a 2-story block, and we took the playgrounds and put them up on the plateau. So
And that model has how many I mean, I know parking was referenced at the meeting. Is it 72? I see it.
75,
And now there's roughly,
25 right now on the
25.
side.
And that's important to point out, too, because, I mean, this board, in terms of hypocrisy, I mean, what you're saying is here, the kids, in terms of there's an open playground, closer to 95 there.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that's important to point out.
Yes, it is.
I mean, we can't say one thing, it's closer to 95 at the building, but then we're okay with this when the kids are closer to 95. So if we're going to use that as one of our arguments, you have to be fair.
Excellent point.
Thank you.
and then finally, just in terms of your designs, have you taken into consideration, it was very much a topic of interest by one of the former board members. We actually had someone speak to it, and it had to do with off-site construction. Have you given serious consideration to that in terms of providing quality construction, life expectancy of facility, and facilitating the period in which the children are out of a school? Has that been given truly serious consideration. It was mentioned several times the other night, everyone's credentials, MIT this, MIT that, God bless MIT. But we also had renderings of buildings that were constructed at MIT for that. So again, trying to be receptive to a viable option that ultimately serves the community because it gets them into the building quicker. Is that viable, or is that pretty much scrapped?
No, it's viable. It's viable in all three options, and it's one of the first tasks that we will undertake with the construction manager who is selected. Very early on, the construction manager is going to be looking at the different construction systems that are possible for these buildings, and the idea of off-site pre-assembled components is going to be one of those questions. We've done it on projects in the past, and I will tell you, it's most effective if there are repetitive forms. So we will be looking at that. We'll be looking at assembling systems off-site and trucking them here to minimize the amount of assembly on the site. But yeah, we're very familiar with the process. That's definitely on the table for all of the options.
Great. Okay, and then just finally, again, this board is prepared to meet again either prior to our meeting on the 18th, which is going to be a busy meeting because we have a bunch of fee considerations to hear about, to act. Since you're going to be formally requesting this, we kind of got a little bit ahead of it so that we could get some of the clarity points, which I think today was very, very constructive. One of the requests I would have, and we'd have to consult, and I saw her here earlier, Katie DeLuca. Katie, is that unlike the previous cycle we went through, we did not have the A2 survey or the requisite documents. Will we have that when we act, and presuming we refer that, so your clock starts the moment we send you that memo saying we approve the MI, here's the, so I guess the question would be to the chairman of the building committee.
And can I also, a second question in terms of process through Peter and through, I guess, Steve Walko as well. The second part of that is if this body rejects Site 1 and hypothetically, process-wise, is more inclined to vote 2, that has to go back now to the building committee, to go back to the Board of Education, to come back to us? Right. It does? Okay.
Okay, so Steve, if you would, Mr. Chairman of the Building Committee, welcome. If you could just touch on that, just again, we just want to have our checklist because you start the 90 days from the moment we send you the approval memo, and so you want to have everything teed up so that you don't have to do another extension. Right.
My understanding of the question was, you were talking about the A2 and we've combined it with the T2 survey. My understanding is that that's been done, although I think there still needs more work to be done if I stand corrected. But that's not the critical piece to the MI application. The critical piece to the MI application, as I understand it, although there are some who are challenging this aspect of it, and I'm learning as I go along too, relative to what's actually needed through the MI process, is that it generally and historically has required a site plan. And a site plan is a detailed set of documents which addresses many aspects of the actual site: drainage, conservation issues, access way, parking. All of those issues need to be wrapped up into a document that affords planning and zoning. And if I understand this correctly from the various people who have spoken at meetings, combines the planning and zoning function of the MI referral. Do I have that right? Yes. And so at this stage, at some point, once a design, and the reason why we said from the beginning we were going to come back to both the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, is before we went down the path of actually supplying the documents to the MI and going through that process and doing all of that work. Clearly, we needed a building and a site by which to then formulate those drainage plans, formulate the conservation issues, so that when it's submitted finally to planning and zoning, it's a comprehensive document that then can be adjudicated by them without having to go back out again to get all that information.
Great. That's so. that's not likely to occur within the abbreviated period of time that we take this up, if in fact it's approved a week from now, 10 days from now.
If what is approved?
So the MI, so our MI is referred based upon materials we receive from the board. It won't have the site plan to accompany it.
Our goal, simply a little bit broader, I'm going to stretch it out a little bit. Right now, we have various deadlines throughout. This school, we are still confident that this school can open for children September of 2018. The deadlines that we're really under right now are the budgetary deadlines of the town of Greenwich. We are working already and are halfway through the process of selecting a construction manager. The reason that's critical is we want the best numbers possible when the budgets are submitted to the BET and then ultimately to the RTM. So we will hopefully by that, I say February, I'm now pushing myself to say March timeframe and then May timeframe for the RTM to not only have the initial estimate of the cost of the building by Tai-Soo Kim, but then a more even refined number by the construction manager, so that when the budget is set, that's the number we feel comfortable with, and that's the number we intend to hit, both on time and on budget. So all of the deadlines really revolve around that process. So our goal is still to get a site plan to planning and zoning early on, while at the same time or soon thereafter have both the estimates by Tai-Soo Kim and the CM, so that when we're speaking in front of the RTM, I'll bet a little bit late than the normal process, we're still prepared to get a vote, and hopefully a favorable vote, by the RTM in May. And we still think we can hit those deadlines.
Great, thank you, Steve. Do you have any questions further? So, Laura, we're going to await the formal submittal for the request, but knowing that our meeting, I believe, is scheduled for December 18th, if you desire, I'm willing to consider a meeting separate from that one, so that we don't bind you into all the other, in advance of that one. I mean, to be flexible about it, to help.
I appreciate your flexibility. If you give us a couple dates and times, we'll make it work, and
Okay.
I'll get a transmittal over to you with a referral.
Great, thank you. Okay, again, I want to thank all those who, from the Tai-Soo Kim partners, the building committee, the school's administration who came today to assist us. I do think there's been a great deal of clarity offered and simplicity as to what the choices are. There are essentially two, and I think you've highlighted for us the advantages and disadvantages of each. So thank you very much. Is there a motion to adjourn?